NIL is on the go at UCF with NIL Go.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does every single week to kick off your week is my good friend Andrew Gluco, purveyor of all things UCF sports, longtime writer, longtime coverer of all things UCF. Andrew, thanks for joining me today. We're talking about NIL Go. We're breaking it down for you. A lot has changed as of July 1st. Even more is changing at the beginning of August. UCF fans, we want you to be the most informed fans on what is going on with all the new rules around NIL. So we'll talk about the rules around that, what kind of enforcement power this organization has, and is UCF doing it right? Is their approach the right way? Let's jump in with NIL Go, Andrew. Before I get your thoughts, I want to talk about what NIL Go is for our listeners today, not only on YouTube, but on pod, right? The new NIL clearinghouse, which is referred to as NIL Go, was born out of the House settlement, the much talked about House settlement that we have covered, that is regulating name, image, and likeness deals. So any deal valued over $600 has to be cleared through NIL Go. It is the student athlete's responsibility primarily to make sure that their deals are reported. And then it is up to the institutions and the conferences to help monitor and make sure that they are doing, there's going to be some self-policing that has to go along here. But this applies to every athlete that is a part of what they originally termed as a Power 5 conference when this deal went down. That means the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, the defunct Pac-12, and the SEC. As I mentioned, any third-party deal worth $600 more, including booster collectives, local sponsors, and national campaigns. So those you have to submit deals for all this stuff. There's a three-step process. Andrew, you and I talked about this before we started recording. This is being run by Deloitte, or it's Deloitte's process. There's the payer association verification that determines whether a sponsor is associated with a school, is a booster, and the criteria include lifetime contributions greater than $50K, and ownership or connection to the athletic department, personnel, or existence solely to support athletics. It's going to put a lot of collectives in that gray area. You have to have a clear business purpose. So the deals have to advance real commercial objectives. No more sham deals, Andrew, where you are pretending like you're compensating them for promoting a product, but the product is not real. And then, there's fair market compensation. Are the deals actual real compensation in turn for the value that the athlete provides? So no more crazy deals where some guy has a shell company that he decides, I'm going to give an athlete $8 million to go to my school, and other athletes are being compensated under $1 million. Those deals will be scrutinized. I want you to jump in here, Andrew. Give me your initial thoughts. What do you think about these rules, and is it a manageable process? It seems like NIL Go has the teeth to enforce that the NCAA never had.
Well, and NIL Go is doing what the original NIL plan was supposed to do, which is name, image, and likeness. It's their sponsorship deals. They're trying to get rid of pay for play, which is just dirty beyond word. And that's why that's going to the school as part of their cap numbers. You know, they have we've heard the $20.5 million. Granted, not all of that is usable. Some of that's going to be used for the building of other scholarships to get their roster set up with the new limits. But you know, you're looking at the 18 mil mark. That is your pay for play revenue share stuff. The stuff that's supposed to be outside is legit NIL deals, and that's what NIL Go's goal is to make happen. Now, there's going to be challenges. There are states lining up to still fight this. There are players who are still trying to challenge the House settlement for one reason or another. Some reasons may be, okay, I can see where they're coming from. And some are like, kind of just make you kind of side eye and just be like, really? But the truth is, we've had the Wild West running college athletics for the last few years. It was an unsustainable model. It was going to break at some point. Money was eventually going to start falling apart, and the college athletic model was just going to basically limit to just a few key programs, and that was really it. This is a way of leveling the playing field because of the cap. Any school can participate in that cap now. Not everyone can get there on their own. Some may need help. This is actually an area where UCF is pretty well leveraged because they're used to working on a small budget, and now they're full-time share members of the Big 12 as of this coming school year. Starting July 1st, they are now a full share member. So they're basically going to double their media their media payouts. They were set to a flat 19 mil this past year. Now they're going to be 38, 39, 40 range, maybe even higher when you add in other things such as NCAA tournament units and whatnot. You can look upwards to $50 million coming to UCF. So they're going to take a good chunk of that. They're going to put it into their fund to use for NIL and the revenue sharing. And that's okay because it's part of their cap. That's where that money's going. And over time, they're going to work on trying to build the outside funding because, as you know, UCF's still a very young school. Their alumni base is still very young. They're still growing as far as financially. They're still developing, multi-level, generational, connections with families and businesses. They're not going to be able to keep up with the University of Florida for now. This is a long play, but I have concerns that states like Tennessee, which was the reason why NIL fell apart in the first place, they went right after it.
Yeah.
I have concerns that a state like Tennessee is going to look for loopholes to try to break this, and it goes back to the NCAA has been begging for congressional help, and if they can get a little bit from Congress, it would neuter, these states from trying to go after the NCAA and by extension NIL Go to try and eliminate the level playing field that the NCAA wants so desperately.
Yeah, I think that because it has the legal backing of a settlement, like a settlement, right, at the federal level, that it's going to be a little bit harder for them to maybe skirt the rules. But like I said, they've got real subpoena power. This process, Andrew, has needed this kind of teeth for a while. So you need to be, I think it's going to come down to enforcement. How do you enforce, and what happens when the first time they have to drop the hammer on somebody for going over the cap, or, what does that punishment look like? I talked to one Power 5 athletic director today for about an hour, and he told me that punishments could include loss of scholarships, loss of eligibility for the athlete, fines to the school, loss of cap space. I mean, they have a broad amount of things they can say if they feel like you are intentionally trying to subvert the process. But it's going to come down to how they define boosters. That's it. These collectives were always a sham, man. It was always boosters just trying to act like a legitimate business organization so that they could fund the whims of the coach and recruiting. You can no longer do that. They're saying, look, if you can do that, it's just got to come from your cap. And when you run out, then you're on the same playing field as everybody else, which I got to say, I agree with. Before we move on, let's talk about enforcement power next. But I want to give you final thoughts on this, man. Is this going the right direction? You mentioned just a second ago that there will be legal challenges yet to come, maybe from states, maybe from individuals. We might see a class action or two. Do you think this is a step in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely. It's a step in the right direction. I mean, what we had before was unsustainable. It was a disaster, and it wasn't meant to be. It was part of the problem was this whole thing was hastily put together. The NCAA did not really do their due diligence in how to put an NIL program together. And so once they tried to, I mean, it got chopped apart. Tennessee, Missouri, a number of other states were able to create legislation or have court cases in their favor to basically unlevel the playing field. For example, Missouri had passed a law that allowed players to start earning compensation in high school as long as they go to a Missouri state school as a way to keep players in state.
Crazy.
This is to help against that, by you have your cap, it's part of it is what it is. That I'm assuming they're going to treat it more like the NFL, which is a hard cap. Granted, they have a lot of ways of finagling that, but not like, baseball and basketball, which is the cap is more like a suggestion than a rule.
Right. Right. Well, you can go over your cap, and pay penalties for going over that, steep penalties, obviously, as pro teams. But, this is pro sports, right? This is where we're at. I mean, you have turned college football into a mini pro sports league that needs these rules now. And it was always going to need them if you are going to allow athletes to get paid. I do want to move on while we have time to talk about the enforcement power that they have. This is something that we haven't seen before. I think it's the most important piece of all of this. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Guys, you guys know the deal. You want to go to games, you know where to go. Game Time. Game Time is the place for you to go if you want to see a game and get tickets at the best prices. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you wanted to go to a game with friends or family? Maybe it's a game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. Guys, the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress is 100% at Game Time. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guaranteed. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use your code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the app today. Guys, what time is it? It's game time. Andrew, what kind of enforcement power do they have? As I mentioned, they've got teeth that the NCAA never had. I alluded to in the first segment that they have the power to punish. But in my opinion, this is the most important piece to all this. If you show institutions, especially the ones at the top with all the money, that the rules don't matter, they will break them. They will 100% break them or find new ways to skirt them. It is paramount to the integrity of NIL under this House settlement that NIL Go enforces the rules ruthlessly and mercilessly on people who offend. You've got to punish, man. Without the punishment, the rules don't matter. And I will not change my stance on this. The NCAA has been criticized, and rightfully so, for a lot of sham punishments that were quite honestly, they were weirdly unevenly heavy-handed at times with punishments. We're going to throw the death penalty at you, and we're going to slap you on the wrist, and we have no reason why. We're just treating it all as we go differently. This can't happen. The rules have to be the rules. If you are a collective and your collective is communicating with the coach about what players need, what deals, that counts towards your cap, man. That's it. Bottom line. So UCF made the decision to dissolve the kingdom and have the competitive success fund, which is this $20.5 million. We reported 2.5 goes towards scholarships across the Olympic sports. And then you've got 18 million left to play with. They can all go to football if they deem so, but those deals have to be on the up and up, and it is the athlete's responsibility first and foremost to make sure that they themselves or their agents are reporting their deals through NIL Go. It is the university's responsibility to audit and monitor and make sure that if you get a top 10 prospect, let's say Scott Frost brings in the number one quarterback in the class of 2027. Well, that guy's going to get deals. The number one quarterback is going to get deals, and you have to make sure that every deal that he gets is a legit one and that he understands there will be real consequences if they don't do this right.
Right. So with the enforcement, the hardest part is going to be setting precedent. One of the NCAA's problem, and you alluded to it, is a lack of consistency. I always go back to the old Jerry Tarkanian quote about the NCAA being so mad at Kentucky, they're going to give Cleveland State 2 more years probation.
I love that.
The actual quote is, quote, the NCAA is so mad at Kentucky, they're going to give Cleveland State 2 more years probation. That's the actual quote. But it kind of highlights the lack of consistency that the NCAA has had with their rules, enforcements, and penalties. So NIL Go with Deloitte is going to have to really kind of figure out, based on what was done wrong and how it was handled by the schools, and make a very consistent set of penalties, because that first penalty that comes down the pipeline, if it's certain schools with certain athletic directors, you're going to have a lawsuit. They're going to fight it. And that's where you have to wonder, like, how sharp are these teeth? Well, we're gonna talk about that in the fact that the conferences are forcing the schools to sign on to this or else. Greg Sankey actually alluded to possible schools like being removed from the conference if they don't play ball with this system. The Power 4 and through extension, the rest of the NCAA is so desperate for this to work. It needed a guy like Greg Sankey to really go all in on it and tell his member schools, you will sign on to this. By signing on to this, you will not try to circumvent through lawsuits, or else we may remove you. The fact that he went out and said something to that extent as a possible resolution to these differences.
Amazing.
And you need that. He's a power. He's one of the big two guys, him and Tony Pertini. So if you've got Sankey in there who's saying this, everyone else is going to fall in line. And that's what you need to give this, to make the teeth sharper, because otherwise there's still that door open. Without congressional help, those states can and probably will fight against stuff that hurts their top state institution.
I agree 100%. Look, removing a team from a conference is going to be a very complicated process for both parties involved. But the statement, I love the statement of take this seriously, because if you're Greg Sankey, parity is, this system is aimed at evening the playing field at least somewhat and creating parity within college football, which is good for your conference. One of the things, as commissioner of the SEC, one of the things they told it was not just that they were winning so many BCS championships, it was how many different schools actually won it, right? You had a stretch where LSU won it, Florida won it a couple times, Alabama won it, Auburn won it, LSU won it again. You had like 4 or 5 different teams that had a legitimate shot and won national titles. You need this to even the playing field, I think, so that the sham of rogue boosters creating fake business entities or using collectives to give their school a competitive advantage on the field is not happening. But that enforcement is the only way that you make sure that continues to happen. And that brings it back to what NIL was truly intended. It was not intended to become a competitive advantage for schools. It was created to provide athletes an avenue to profit on their own name, the same way the schools have been for decades. That's it. That's the essence of NIL. It's not about the schools. It's about the athletes. So I think this brings the focus back to the athletes, my friend. I'm excited about it. I think that, look, Is UCF doing it right? That's what we're going to talk about in our next segment. How does all this apply to UCF? Where does UCF stand? Folks, there's no better person to explain to you whether UCF is doing this right than the guy to my
virtual,
right. my virtual right, your left, maybe. We'll talk about that next on Locked on UCF. Is UCF doing this the right way? Now, we were among the first to report the dissolution of the Kingdom, which was their NIL collective. That's looking like a genius move at this point, the way the rules are fleshing out. And the focus on the Competitive Success Fund, which is the $20.5 million cap that UCF will control directly. Now, we have not heard from Terry Mohajir on how much of that cap they plan to account or allocate to other sports. But certainly, I think we'll learn more about that as football needs start to come into purview. As you know, at many schools, the Olympic sports cannot exist without football. They are subsidized by the revenue that football drives. So you got to take care of your cash cow first. Doesn't mean that those sports don't matter or they are not important, but we live in a world of reality where things have to be paid for. Football pays for a lot in most Power 4/Power 5 institutions. What do you think about the way that UCF handled this in hindsight? Now that the rules are starting to come into clear view, was the dissolution of the Kingdom the right move? And is UCF uniquely situated to take advantage of this new model?
Well, there's two ways to answer this question. One is the dissolution of the collective being the right move. And the answer to this is yes, it was the right move. And as we're finding out now, there are schools that we'll find out in the upcoming months, but there is a question whether they're actually using the collectives properly and whether the work that they do will count against the cap. Well, UCF took that ambiguity out of the equation. There is no question because there's no collective. They're working direct. They've got people to handle that. And then anything outside of the school would be handled as an external, NIL deal that would have to go through scrutiny with the, with Deloitte and NIL Go. The other way is with the collective still in place. They have to really work to redefine what the collective does. And this is something you and I were talking about before the show. I think that they need to kind of redefine themselves more as a business broker than a contract creator. Right. If they create contracts for players, there's a lot of questions. Are they too close? Have the streams been crossed? Is it going to count against the cap? But however, if they operate as a business broker, they can be a place where players can go to looking for, sponsorship deals. And that was really what the collective was thought to be used for when they were started before the court cases threw all that out. Right. So, McDonald's wants to sponsor, a UCF player or a couple of UCF players. UCF is probably a bad example because they don't have the collective more. We'll use Ohio State. Ohio State still has their collective. They contact the collective, then that they want a couple of players. Then the collective helps based on the criteria that McDonald's is looking for. And I'm just throwing names out there, just random names just to kind of fill in the blanks on this. They then look based on the criteria that McDonald's gave, finds them a couple of, a few athletes to kind of interview and figure out which one they want. And then they sign them to their, McDonald's then signs them to their NIL agreement. If it's $600 or more, it has to go through the clearinghouse and make sure it gets through the proper scrutiny. Is this fair value? Are they actually, having to provide something to get this money? Well, which is the big thing. No pay to play in this is what they're trying to clear out through the clearinghouse. If collectives can redefine themselves like that, I think they can still exist and provide a valuable service. But because collectives have been used for a pay-to-play model for a number of years, unless you did a hard reset, it's almost better to get rid of them and start over. So UCF's already gotten rid of theirs. Perhaps something else can grow from that outside of the school. No arm's length agreements, no nothing. Completely outside, severed connection with the school to then work as a business broker unit.
Yeah, here's why I think UCF made the right decision to dissolve the kingdom. Most of the money being used to fund it were coming from individuals who, under these rules, would be qualified as boosters, thus disqualifying their contributions as not counting towards your cap. So if it's going to count towards your cap, just get rid of it. Have them give their money to the Competitive Success Fund that you control and do your best to fill that bucket every year. Now, we talked about whether UCF, had enough money to even fill that $20.5 million in there. But, if you're a business owner and also a booster, you're excluded. You may even have a legitimate business, but if you give significant contributions to the university every year and are qualified as a booster, they're saying that your business does not qualify either. So, it reverts it back to where, like, hey, if you maybe are UCF alumni that is well off and you've started businesses, but you have not been donating to athletics, then you are still not a booster, and you should be able to have your business do deals directly with athletes without it counting towards UCF's cap. And the more that they can get done for athletes, but it calls on your community to step up. And I think that that's the most important thing here, right? This is what it was always intended to be. If there is a legitimate market purpose for the deal, then it won't count towards the cap as long as it's not affiliated with the university. You and I both know in the Power 5 conferences that these collectives were having conversations with the head coaches, right? Like about who needs what deal and what guys they need to get in. And then the collectives go back and they put those deals together. And that's that.
Arm's length agreement.
Yeah, it was happening. Now that cannot happen. But going back to what we talked about in our second segment, without enforcement, none of this matters. We're going to keep a close eye on this. There are some more deadlines coming. So as of the first couple days in August, what we're going to find is when the rules set in, you may see some people come back to the field in recruiting when these deals that did not go through the proper channels fall apart and the athletes find out that they can't get the money because it wasn't set up right. And you're going to see some very highly rated recruiting classes come back down to earth, I think, in August. It's just my prediction, but we'll see. That's my opinion after talking to ADs and coaches and people who know a lot about this process. So great conversation, Andrew. As always, I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you guys for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day, hopefully making you a more informed fan every single weekday here at Locked On UCF. For your second listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.